for SRE Day London, which is September 19th to 20th. As long-time listeners will know from the past several months, where we went over that in the conference section, found at the end of the podcast. But I was, we were landing here at the London City Airport, and I really like it here. Probably the city I've been to the most outside of Texas, I'm guessing. I'd have to see how many times I went to Las Vegas for conferences, but I don't think that counts. That's just an exception, right? That's just like
not
going
really
to
a
the
city.
office at
Like
some point.
Las Vegas is just a part of the world everyone visits, no matter where they're from.
Yeah,
it's like an airport
it's part of
in
everyone's
city
city.
form. Never counts.
Yeah.
Have you been to Nevada, Kotek? No, I've only been to Vegas.
Exactly. I don't even know what state Las Vegas is in. It's in its own state.
Yes.
Anyhow, I was flying in here and I was thinking, like, man, I want to live here. I always want to live here, and so I've been walking around. I haven't been here that many hours today. Walking around trying to like compare and contrast the London scene with like the Amsterdam scene, and I want to get y'all's two input on this and maybe get some feedback from the listeners. Feedback is the wrong word. Some comments from the listeners, but there's I don't know how to nail it down yet. But well, first of all, London is huge ass city, right? But it seems a little like more rough. I don't know, like maybe it's just because there's more people and there's more, like when people put gum on the street and it turns into those black spots, and then it looks like a Dalmatian on the sidewalk everywhere. Like you got that going on a lot more. Like there's a lot of green space. Like it seems like the infrastructure is relatively okay for such a huge city, but there's just like this vibe of like a little more like a little grittier, rougher or something, which I don't know. I don't know if that comparison is fair or it's different, but Amsterdam is a lot softer. Yeah. The Amsterdam's like a little more chill and laid back. Like it just feels like sweatpants, is what's going on with Amsterdam. And here it's like jeans. Like I think you got a jeans versus a sweatpants situation, and I don't know what's going on with that. But it's very foggy in my head. What's y'all's impersonation comparing these impression of comparing these things?
I don't know if I have like enough. I've only been to each city a few times, so it's not like I've sampled it enough to have there. But I don't know. I mean, you'd be better to know. But I always feel like when I've been to Amsterdam, it was more like tourist centric. But this was kind of before Brexit and everything. Whereas, you being one example, it feels like Amsterdam. And again, this is like, I really don't know, but it feels like it's taken over now more as like a potential like European, kind of, if you will, the overflow from London, like where something had to be in the EU and Amsterdam sort of got that influx. But it's always sort of like, and also too the language. I wonder how much the language, barrier is like affects it, because it's like in London you just feel like, oh, like I can go anywhere. I speak to anyone and it's fine. And it's actually quite a bit like that in Amsterdam. But I always, you kind of have to have that initial, like they speak Dutch and then you respond in English and you're like, and then they're always really nice. But there is kind of like that awkwardness. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that plays into it. I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
Could be.
I mean, I haven't been to London since pre-Brexit, pre-COVID. So has it gotten grittier, or has it always kind of been that way? I mean,
I've never said gritty about London. I would have said busy. Like London just
busy.
feels like
okay.
Vibrant.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Like there's lots of stuff going on. Whereas Amsterdam, I am sort of like, it feels a little bit more relaxed when I'm walking.
I think see, that's a word I don't think of often in an aesthetic context. But yeah,
well, that's because you live in Amsterdam.
Well, the canals too in Amsterdam, like there's a lot of water, there's like, it's just like when you're walking around, it's like peaceful, there's like, it's relaxed. There's like, I do kind of have that vibe. Whereas London, it's like the tube and the cabs and like stuff's going on and there's lots of people and, you're going places, you're doing things, everyone's going to see, the tourist attractions, Big Ben. I don't know. So I think that part is true. Right.
Yeah. I think that's a good comparison. It's busy. There's a lot of stuff going on. Whereas in Amsterdam, there's stuff going on, but it's a lot more relaxed. And then you're also it is a lot more of a touristy place, which I think drives. I mean, London's a big touristy place, but like the type of tourism in Amsterdam is, I don't know, is somehow a little different. Like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
It's almost like the tourists dress nicer or something. I don't know what it is,
more
but the
Europeans,
tourists are like
less
a little
Americans.
different.
I mean, one of the things that I've thought is if I lived in London or New York City, I would always feel like I was missing out on something because the city's just got so much to do.
Mm,
And no offense to Amsterdam, but I was like, I could chill here, right? I felt like hey, it'll be there next week. It
uh-huh.
doesn't feel like Amsterdam doesn't feel like a 24/7 place.
Yeah.
Maybe it
Yeah.
is. Maybe I'm wrong, but
Oh, well, I mean, in the tiny little part where all the tourists are, it is, but that's just a weird. That might as well be like a shopping mall in the middle of the town that people go to. It's not like I don't know. It's a tiny
yeah.
area. Well, I think we got that one sorted out. Busy. London's busy. Amsterdam laid back. And I think
And New York City never sleeps.
that's right. And I think there's one last thing, and this is good thinking for like the effect of art and architecture and kind of your surrounding on your way of thinking, right? Like London, of course, is like a mishmash of everything. There's not like one consistent design architecture or just like whatever. Whereas like Amsterdam wasn't destroyed in the war, so it has like kind of one distinct style and in the well-known part. And then even outside of the well-known part, the style kind of follows that. And so it's very like harmonious in that and there's plenty of variety, so it's not boring. But it has that one look to it. Whereas in London, it's just like all over the fucking place, right? Like there's it's kind of like as if there was no zoning for what your building can look like, and people just went wild, uh, which can be fun, but it adds to that general busyness of things that doesn't exist otherwise. And man, they got to put some air conditioning in those tubes. I don't know what they're doing. It's pretty warm down there. Well, speaking of things that need air conditioning, have you heard, Matt Ray, that IBM purchased your former company?
Yeah, yeah. Somebody asked me yesterday what the acquisition price was. I can't tell. Yeah, I've got this 170-page PDF, 202 pages of PDFs from the because I bought my options on the way out the door, and like all I know is how
Uh,
much people got paid and how much options were worth. I can't find and the final amount was, which is what
what?
people want to know because there's so many caveats around like this is being held in escrow. This comes out when these people get paid. I
Uh,
mean, selling a company is complicated.
yeah. Oh boy. Well,
Well,
as
there's
someone who used
time
to
for a
work in
job
M&A.
for ChatGPT, Matt. You need to
Oh yeah.
upgrade to the Gemini Pro model or whatever, and upload that entire thing in there, and just ask how much.
Ooh, see that?
What was the total valuation based on all of the things in here?
Yeah,
See
yeah.
if we can figure it out for you. I guess maybe the better question is just like, well, you were an employee. Like, did you make money or did you lose money? That's really
Oh,
the
I mean, I made money.
okay. So
I was there for two years, and so I bought my options about a month ago.
so you could say,
Yeah,
like, at least you could say like it's employees, at least employees that started 2 years ago had a chance to make money, which is like, which is good, right? I mean, probably most of the time it doesn't work out where you get nothing. You get a big tax write-off. So
yeah.
if you made money, it's good. Now, did you make so much money that you're retiring from your current job in the podcast?
Man, I got to work early the next day.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's really all that matters. It's like, no, I'm still working. I'm still here working. So
Yes.
I think maybe you could buy like a neon sign for the back, back there. I don't know what I was gonna say, but kind of up your remote video game by having
Well,
a neon sign.
we're watching Parks and Rec with the kids, and I feel like I need to get some Entertainment 720, some some Tom Haverford swag in the back, and I'll just get like baller in neon or something.
Oh yeah. Or like maybe a neon sign that says, "I don't want to be here either." Like I think that would be like the best thing to see in every video call.
Probably not. Probably not.
So but I think, Matt, I did want to, I was just doing the like no inside knowledge. I'm just a person reading press releases. It feels like this is the natural end. Like it's like, well, like here, I'll just read the one line here from the press release. Like, we're thrilled to announce KubeCost is becoming part of the IBM family, joining forces with Apptio and Turbonomic, which like to me, it's just like, oh, makes sense. Like this is obviously focused in on Kubernetes. Turbonomic has a bunch of cloud costing tools. Apptio has a bunch of financial modeling. So it's sort of like, oh, just makes sense. You just roll all this together, another set of, cost management tools, throw it into the portfolio. IBM sellers will have another bullet in the gun. And it's like, so it just seems like pretty simple, pretty standard, as Cote would maybe say, tuck-in acquisition to a larger, in this case, kind of a roll-up, kind of an IBM roll-up, just kind of rolling up all this stuff together. So is that a fair summary of it, or is that,
Probably. I mean, I don't think that they're going to take KubeCost and replace their other cost monitoring products with it. They'll carve out, okay, it was nice, the fun things you guys were doing around cloud costs, but we're going to focus just on Kubernetes because cloud cost is a solved problem. And then they were getting into some ML stuff that was good. They had some good scaling, some huge customers. It's not a bad acquisition for IBM by any means. And this this wasn't a fire sale. So I mean, they weren't like we're dying on the vine here. They were fine. So that's all I can really share. But I think, I don't know. I think the competitive landscape was getting more competitive, and maybe this looked more attractive than raising more funding.
Well, so we haven't talked about. I mean, now you're in the security business, so that's what you know all about.
Yeah,
you're a regular whiz at it. But like, what is like now that you're a little bit away from the FinOps world, and then you think about like this portfolio, like what is the what's the deal with being a FinOps product line or a company? Like, and what I mean by that is it good to like have one unified suite that monitors everything, or do you want to focus on one thing, or like what's the angle that you go for? Like, and I'll just say one last thing. It seems like a lot of FinOps is like, I want to use all this cloud stuff and it's all different, and so I need a way to make it normal, as opposed to way back when in like on-premises IT management is just sort of like cost tracking for things. But FinOps seems a lot more about metered things.
Well,
I think
together. Yeah, one of the good things that we did with the Open Cost project was we because it was open source through the CNCF, it became like the ground floor entry for anything. Is if it's in Open Cost, you can't compete on it. I mean, if you're a new vendor, if you're a vendor and you're looking to get into this space, you're like, okay, table stakes are cost monitoring. Everybody can do it. It's undifferentiated heavy lifting at this point. So, I mean, if I was doing a FinOps company for today, I'd grab the open source stuff and build on top of it because it works, and it's one less thing my dev team has to do. And I would make sure I have full coverage of everything, because the reality is the sorts of people who pay for stuff have SaaSes and multi-cloud. I mean, those are the accounts you want to land, is the people who have problems that need paying for. And that's where it definitely gets into the more FinOpsy space, because then you're out of monitoring. Really, you're into budgeting and governance and projections, and that's more the FinOps side. More the accounting, less of the engineering.
Right.
The engineering should be solved at this point. I mean, there's a lot of more fun things you can do with engineering, but I think the product needs to be something that it's almost like those companies that plug into Salesforce, right? They're like, Salesforce is the engine, right? The FinOps, the monitoring, cost monitoring is the engine, but what are you going to do on top of it? Well, you can do this and this and this
Right.
and this. And so you'll get more specialized, or you'll just try to solve it for everybody. So you can either be Salesforce or you can be Gainsight, right? And Gainsight just runs on top of Salesforce.
So I'm hearing two things so far. One, you need to have breadth. You want to be able to collect your cost stuff from as many things as possible, right?
Yeah.
And then two, and this is a good example of like one of our favorite conversations. How do you make money off of open source? But two, like you're saying, there's basically the engine of getting the data of of your money, what you're having to pay for is commoditized and open source, right? Which isn't to say it's simple and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, that's not going to be where there's differentiation. And then the other side of that is, so then what you do as a company is you actually have to think about who are the money people, the accountants, and what are they going to want to do with this information, right? So it's like the analysis and the reporting, and then maybe in like fantasy land, I don't know if it's fantasy land, but like for example, I could imagine with if you're using AI stuff, which is metered, at some point you would want your AI FinOps thing to just like delete the API key that someone is using who's like running a $5 a minute like spreadsheet or something, right? And so you want to just go in and be like, well, even if it is mission critical, it's about to be mission bankruptcy, so we'll just shut it down, right? And kind of do something like that.
It happens. Yeah, I mean, there definitely are shops that are like that. I just feel like KubeCost was starting to get squeezed, like the legacy vendors, like the companies that IBM owns that do cloud costs, they were getting into Kubernetes, and KubeCost was expanding out of it where there was a lot more competition. And then you have a lot of Kubernetes automation companies that are like, we'll automate over costs. And like, maybe it was good, maybe it wasn't, but it started to become something that they're like, this doesn't need to be a separate PO. You don't need a separate vendor for this unless you do, right? Unless you are this big and you need this much governance, you don't need another vendor. And that's when when startups start becoming a checkpoint on a competitive list, like it's starting to get hot in here. So I would say the timing's probably good. They're probably
found a good home, right? In the end, right? It feels like this was like a pretty good outcome. It's not worth.
They're definitely worse places to go. I've been there.
I was gonna say, but we know it's not worth billions of dollars. It sounds like there was enough money. Investors made a little bit of money. Employees made a little bit of money. Probably everyone that wants an opportunity will get a good job at IBM. So, and I do think in addition to all the things you said, you always have the broader vendors kind of like package all this functionality together, but then you have the actual platform, like cloud providers themselves, trying to make their costing tools better. So you're always gonna have that downward pressure. Like take any of the cloud vendors, like they'll be like, hey, we'll give you everything. We're trying to and then that maybe they only get so good, but eventually that'll probably get pretty good, right? And then same thing with rolling all these tools together. At some point, it's just like, yeah, you only want a couple of these things. Otherwise, to like some of the things Cote is saying, otherwise you just end up with a whole bunch of data no one's using, right? You're just like, okay, well now we have another set of like costing data coming in from another third party that it's just sort of like making us all confused, right? You just kind of want to make it simple.
Yeah. So okay, so I at least I know of one more question I got here. Now, we have this one of the software defined talk fundamental laws of software is that you're probably going to start with the SaaS, and then you're going to be forced to do an on-premise version, right? Like this pattern happens over and over again. Now, are there similar like what are some kind of patterns like that in the FinOps space? Like you do some new feature, or there's some new company, and like you do something that's a little like, I don't even know what it would be, but then you find out like, oh right, well we still need to integrate with Active Directory. Or just like there's this thing that like you keep putting off and you don't really want to accept as you have to do, just like doing an on-premise thing, and then all the FinOps people end up being like, oh yeah, we actually do have to support multiple currencies in different
Oh
jurisdictions
yeah,
or whatever.
definitely. Yeah,
I mean,
definitely
that
currency
seems like,
support.
as they would say, table stakes. I mean, but or
Well,
maybe not.
OpenTrust doesn't do it, but yeah, yeah. I mean, currency is definitely one of the things, but I think there are a lot of different ways to slice and dice your bill. So you could do like amortized, net amortized. There's like a drop down when you start getting in the cloud billing, like 4 different ways to look at how costs are projected, and it's like, it's just all those little details that the engineers who wrote KubeCost, yeah, they started in that space. They understood it. But if you were like coming from the outside, you kind of start to look at it, you're like, well, how hard could it be, right?
Yeah.
Or reconciliation. Reconciliation is the fact that like your cloud bill doesn't show up for like 36 hours later, because Amazon isn't like, oh, we're charging by the second and we're writing your bill out by the second. No, they're writing it out like 24 hours, 36 hours later. And so if you want any sort of real time, feeling around your billing, that's another hard problem.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and then, if you want to start doing like, adaptive workloads based off costs, that's, and then you need to know something about what those costs actually are from the billing source versus what they're listed as, because any vendor, any customer of any size is going to have negotiated down different things. There's not just like, oh, everything's 50% less. It's like, no, if you spend 200,000 a month on this, we'll give you this for free. Or, once you hit, it just gets complicated real fast.
And maybe that's like the main thing is like, this is a lot more complicated than you think it is. And probably, I mean, just for one organization trying to monitor multiple sources of cost, that's complicated. But then if you were to think of having thousands or tens of thousands of companies that all in different industries, in different geographies that do different accounting things and everything, then you need a level of customization that like only Salesforce suffers from, right? Like,
well, the settings page is more than one page, right? That's the key.
Right. So the simplicity is not really a virtue, at least in consuming and organizing all this stuff. Well, where simplicity is a virtue, when it comes to figuring out what to do with an open source project that you forked, and then you give it over to a foundation, and this is that the news being that, let's see, as always, you two can correct my terrible summary, but we covered this, I think, a couple episodes ago. The Elastic Search Stack thingy was forked. Was it called Kibana? Did I get that right? At least into another stack, and that was, one presumes, because Amazon was what's the term they use? Freeloading on stuff. They weren't contributing enough, and then so the Elastic people were like, "Hey, not cool." And then maybe other people, were not doing that, so they changed the license around. So you would need to, they could get some money, which is fine. MacBooks don't pay for themselves, and now they kind of re-open sourced, which I think we covered extensively with the Brackenthetical, just blog post of the year, we can probably call it, of CY 2024, and then it seems like Amazon and some friends, they moved their fork to the Linux Foundation, and I guess they've even made a whole other foundation, the open search subgroup of the Linux Foundation supergroup. Yeah. And so like, I guess this happens pretty frequently, that you sort of move an industry. You have a collection. I think there may be like 5 or 6 companies that were working on it and kind of backing the open search thing. So I don't know. Is this good? Bad? Like, what,
I was say,
what's going
I feel
on
like
with
it's the final, the final decision here. Like it's sort of like it's, if you will, like we can almost say pull request accepted, issue closed. We can all move on. And so I don't know. At the end of the day, as you already alluded to, we covered the Elasticsearch in depth last episode, but it's sort of like, okay, well, I don't know if it worked for them, but I guess they seemed like they were excited, to your point about the brachythetical blog post. So it's like AWS and all the people that were annoyed by it have now successfully forked it. It seems like the project is then very healthy. It has now been handed to the Linux Foundation. And I can't imagine anyone, if you were going forward and if you were interested in participating in an OpenSearch project or, around, any of this, like, why would you not work on OpenSearch, right? It seems like just like the thing. So it's like, great. I mean, I don't know of anyone, I guess you could say open source
doesn't
working
change
as
anything.
open source working as designed, it's like, okay, like if you wanted to prove that something could be forked and could end up in the same or a healthier place, like, good job, Elasticsearch. Like, I don't know, like, I don't know, but I guess, I guess at the end we'll just have to say, we'll see what happens. The part I do like is like, it's sort of like we can kind of just from this point, we can mark it and say like, okay, what's going to happen going forward? Like, I would predict Elasticsearch will quietly be acquired by a large strategic vendor. Who knows? Maybe. And they will just, and this will go on and OpenSearch will kind of lead the way in this area. And, that'll be the end of this. So
we'll stop talking about it.
Yeah. And there's just nothing to say, but it's like, I don't, to me, it's like, not sure really any of these outcomes. And maybe the question is at the end of the day is just for Elastic. It's like, maybe there was no path for them to like, if you will, do anything different. Maybe they were always just going to be on the path of being acquired by a large company and not, and maybe in the end, this is just sort of like, who cares? Doesn't matter. They could have done this. They could have done something else. Their fate was the same. What do you think, Matt?
Well, I posted in the chat my thoughts on it. Harkens back to the Simpsons Rosebud episode when Homer's like, well, we didn't get any money and Mr. Burns got what he wanted. Marge, I'm confused. Is this a happy ending or a sad ending? And Marge just says, it's an ending. That's enough.
Yeah.
It's over. Okay. It's done. I don't think anything changes at this point. The story continues. OpenSearch is going to probably continue. I don't think they have, I'm going to speak with complete unauthority. I'm going to say they don't have like a massive roadmap of like, oh, we're going to do this, this, and this. It's probably like, we're going to keep the lights on and keep this thing just humming along, doing the great stuff it does. And Elasticsearch can't get back their community.
Yeah. So so it is one of those things, like, it'll be a good marker going forward. So Coach, what do you think? What would the corporate strategist say?
Yeah, I mean, in the scenario you two have imagined up onto the table, like it's just like it's like a late stage piece of software. You're just like, this thing does what it does well. We don't need to like revolutionize the way search works. Let's just make sure it's cool, right? Like that is like, I haven't really thought about this idea that there's certain open source projects that don't really need to evolve further, and you really just need to maintain them, and that's a whole different mode. Well, not whole different, but it's an interesting different mode of operating, which you could probably learn some interesting what's the word, management theories from it based on, and then apply that to like closed source technology stuff, right? Like what would be the comparison?
Oh, I know
between how you
is.
like comparison between how you manage like mainframe software, and then like if OpenSearch is kind of done and you don't need to evolve it, how you maintain that, right? Like,
well, your
what
PE
staffing do you have, all of that?
Yeah, your PE shows up and says, let me solve this for you. You are going to keep doing exactly what you're doing on a much tighter budget. And we're not going to innovate. We're going to just milk your customers for what they have. And people are going to be like, I love that software. It never changes. Yeah. And that's what a lot of these projects are. And that's in open source. That's a good thing, right? It's like, you know what?
Right.
If I need a web browser, I can go grab Apache, and I know like it's still maintained. It's still keeping up to date.
Like what's the equivalent of the milk the cow till it dies and then chop it up for steak that you would have in a PE situation? What's that equivalent in like the open source sort of project world?
Well, I mean, I don't think it gets chopped up into steak. That's the thing. I think like, you know what, this cow's not milking, but we named it and we like it, and so we're gonna keep it around.
I think though,
And
but I think it's actually the foundation. I think that's what it is. It's sort of like it gets to a point, it's pretty stable. There's a large group, not even large, there's a group of like large companies that depend on it, that want it to be
Mhm.
open source, in this case, led by AWS, but there's others, right? Go into the open source. And so it's really like, this is an important thing. We don't want to compete on this. We actually want this piece of infrastructure and this code to be very consistent. It's fine if more people are working on it. In fact, the more people working on it is better because we're distributing the cost and we're all kind of keeping it up
Uh-huh.
to speed. So in this case, I think, if you wanted to go back in time and it'd be like, well, Elasticsearch, instead of doing another way to have approached this would have been like, hey, our company's fundamentally not growing. Let's find a strategic buyer. Let's make sure that people that want to pay us for maintenance and use the product can, and let's do that, and let's keep it open source. Let's sort of accept that reality, and then let's make sure that we go forward, and let's
Mhm.
make sure we can make some money off it, and that's at least maybe attractive to
well,
private equity. And at the same time, let's keep the core platform the same. Let's keep it open source because that still it's valuable, right? There's always going to be a small set or a set of people that want to pay us for support. Let's own that niche and let's not try to do something even bigger. Go ahead, Matt.
and they've moved on as a company from just Elasticsearch, right? I mean, they're like a monitoring platform. You know, they have other monitoring products, and I assume they're still using Elasticsearch, the database, but they've built a lot of value on top of it. So at this point, it's probably not changing that much. It's probably fairly undifferentiated for them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, let's open source it," you know. But I mean, I would hazard to guess it's like a quarter of what they do,
Right.
right?
Well, then that's even better. Then I think then you're just taking like, hey, let's just build on the notoriety and success of this to basically build new products that we can
Yeah.
sell.
Well, I mean,
Change the scope,
and
right?
you know,
And I guess that's what they're doing by default, right? That's sort
yeah,
of
they were doing that by default, and then when they come back and they open source it, they're like, "Well, we open source it because we don't need it anymore," you know. Or I mean, and it's like, well, it's too late, right? You
you
can't
kind of
put
like,
that.
if you will, they punted all the goodwill they had. It's just like, well, and maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe for the next set of products, like it won't be a big thing. But I would bet we'll have to put a reminder. Maybe next year we'll check in and be like, is Elasticsearch still, or Elastic, sorry, the name of the company, is it still a standalone entity? It'll be interesting to see. I don't know. I predict it's going to be acquired, but we shall see.
Yeah, it was also making me think like how do all these the answer is of how is probably because I don't know enough about what their actual business is, but you've got all these like your Datadogs and your PagerDuty and even Splunk, all these companies. Well, I guess Splunk didn't someone buy Splunk? I think so.
Cisco.
This guy,
That's
yep.
right. Yeah, and like there's all these companies that are kind of like single app companies that are independent that seem to make a lot of money, and it is kind of curious that they stay independent instead of getting
But you
gobbled
named
up
the
by
two that
things.
you named there, though, are pretty like, Datadog, not open source, SaaS, very sticky
Oh,
once
sure,
it
sure.
gets in there. PagerDuty, not open source, SaaS. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
like you can create like a SaaS business that's throwing off a ton of cash. I mean, always going to be very valuable.
Well,
So that's like a big, and again, they don't have an open source story, right? And by definition, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's good for them. So these are just sort of like, we solve a problem really well. People like using our SaaS product. They're renewing at a high rate. Would you like to be part of our annuity stream? And that's what investors like.
and the acquisitions they make are feature checkboxes, right? Because it's like,
Mm.
you're buying Splunk, vaguely what that feature set is. Like, oh look, they bought an AI company, right? And that just means like in 6 months there's going to be slightly better AI in the application, and so like what Datadog is today is not what they were when they started, but if you are a startup in this space, you're like, oh, we're Kubernetes monitoring. Well, there's some 800-pound gorillas who don't do Kubernetes yet, but Datadog now does Kubernetes, right? And so it's like all of a sudden your startup that was flush with cash is now hurting for customers,
Right.
because
Or
Datadog
to take it
just
back just one
lowered
time.
the boom on you.
If you're IBM and you got like Turbonomic, you're like, what we should really do? Better Kubernetes cost management. Okay.
Yeah.
Now we have cube cost. Check.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like,
Check.
just roll these things together and create yourself, a bigger and bigger revenue stream. That's probably not super exciting to the outside world, but maybe it becomes really profitable. over
Well,
time.
but yeah, but that's how you keep like your stock moving ahead.
Keep going to
You're
earn
not
it. Yeah,
stagnating.
keep the
You're not
PE
getting turned
multiple.
into
Yeah,
hamburger.
absolutely. You don't get turned into exactly. Don't be turned into hamburger. That's the goal.
I wonder if like because definitely if you're in a SaaS business and most software businesses now, like, and you're well established, your job is basically to retain your existing customers and get more customers and get more money, kind of incrementally growing, right? And so I wonder if that encourages a lot more, as you were referencing, Brandon, tuck-in applications, or I like the way you put it, Matt Ray, the feature checkbox acquisition. This is just another setting, another checkbox in your settings window that you buy, because essentially if you want to retain your customers and expand their consumption of it and then add on new customers, which gets to be difficult at some point, then you need to have enough features such that going through all the trouble to do something new and different isn't attractive enough, right? Like, oh, we could switch to a whole new FinOps platform, but now they monitor Kubernetes so we can stay here.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Right. And as opposed to like the kind of earlier stage in a company where you're trying to like, enter new markets and really build up that whole new thing. And then, there's a type of acquisition in older, larger companies where they are trying to enter new markets and do things. But I have a feeling that happens a lot less than just like the feature checkbox thing in the settings acquisition.
And this ties back to why like the FTC is pushing back on large acquisitions, is because like if I looked in the monitoring space, like I wouldn't do a startup here, right? Because like you are 6 months away from being destroyed because some team gets spun up, or that will turn you into a checkbox in a feature set. It's hard to the gorillas have gotten too large.
Yeah. Well, speaking of large gorillas, it looks like one of the biggest gorillas out there is taking a page from, I think maybe I think Dell's return to office policy. The last we heard from it was you don't have to return to the office as long as you don't want your career to go forward. I think was there's no promotions or any special things that you get unless you come into to Dell here. Now, my suggestion when I worked at Dell, you had to pay for the coffee. Maybe if they made the coffee free, that would I think people would be interested. Also, if you're in the Austin area, Dell is actually nicely located for most traffic situations, depending on where you live. Like I used to live in a more central, I don't know what they call it nowadays, but back when I lived there, they called it North Central Austin. And so every time I drove up to Round Rock, it was against rush hour traffic. It was great. I could get to work on time. So, I didn't have all those problems. Anyways, free coffee, that might work. Maybe make them pay for the milk, 5 cents or something. But it looks like Amazon has like, I like what they're doing there in Round Rock. Now what we're going to do, I think the policy is like, you got to come in 5 days or bad things. I don't know if the consequences were said. Was it just like, oh, you're fired?
I think it's just implied, right? Like, yeah, though I guess the announcement was, I think just coming this January, all Amazon workers will return to the office 5 days a week.
I think it's 3 of us. We've worked remotely for most of our careers, I think. And so we have the bias of normalcy, but I feel like also when it comes to remote working, we might have the bias of being right, of just like what I still am astonished that this is like an issue. It's a variation of Brandon's principle. The only thing that's shocking is that we're still shocked, but it's sort of like, it's just why I don't get why this is still something that happens, that people talk about, because it doesn't seem. I think the studies are out there that like you can choose for it to work or choose for it not to work.
But I think this is where I think, we won't like rehash all the like reasons why remote work can work and all the examples. Like we've probably talked about that on many episodes, but I did think this time was kind of interesting because like they just published Andy Jassy's like internal memo and you can just read it. And I think thing that jumped out at me was one of the things he wrote in there is that, you know, he's been at Amazon for 27 years and he started as a level 5, which I think is like relatively like, you know, toward the bottom. And I just thought to myself, is like, just from a human perspective, it's like, if you've been there 27 years, you started at level 5, you've now risen to the top of being the CEO, right? You're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You've had unprecedented success. Like all of that is going to like, you know, kind of feed, you know, your perception, right? It's like, well, oh, of course the management principles are great. Of course working in the office is great. Like, I mean, you have so much success, you know, kind of the halo effect, right? I don't think you could ever detach yourself from that and be like, well, let me look at it from a different perspective. Let me look at like, and also you're an executive where a lot of the executives are going to spend most of their days in meetings. Meetings are generally better in person if you're going to do them, right? And it's like all of that is sort of just feeding, you know, I think the perspective. So I just kind of come back to like, yeah, I can see why he would come to this conclusion, and like it's his strong preference. And it's like, I guess at some point it's kind of like we were saying before. It's like, well, at least it's a final decision now for everybody. Like all the Amazon employees know that if you're going to work there, you have to work there 5 days a week. That will become a self-selecting, you know, factor for everyone. The people that ultimately that will be left. So let's say a year from January, will either have decided that like it works for the life or they prefer to work in person. And I think that's probably, if you were to ask the Amazon executives, it's like, that's what they want. Right. And so time will tell if it like ultimately has any negative impacts on them. But it does sort of, and I think the final thought I had about this too is sort of like, you know, we haven't really talked about it, but I've had a lot of thoughts about like that founder mode essay, and I'm thinking like a good like retort to that would be write something like employee mode, right? And like employee mode is sort of like accepting like what things at this company should I never challenge? You know what I'm saying? Like, because every company would be like, every company's like, come in, we want new ideas and things like that. That is 100% not true. There are certain things in the company that you should not, you know, you should be like, if I can't accept this or I'm not on board with this, I should not work here. I'm the problem, not the company, right? And I think this is sort of becoming one of those things where it's like, hey, you know, this is how Amazon wants to work. They want to write 6-page memos. They want everyone in the office. Like we all know now, like everybody that works there should know. And so is it the way that you personally want to work? Maybe, maybe not, but they're very clear on it going forward. And then over time, we'll just see, like, will this like hurt Amazon? You know, we'll check back in a year or two to see if they've either changed the policy or if things have not worked out for them. What do you think, Matt?
Well, I think that their shipping facilities are going to be a lot more efficient now that people are back in the office. But I mean, I agree that companies are just going to make the decision for themselves. It doesn't matter what you know the studies show one way or another. They're just going to have like their animal instincts about, you know, this is how we run our company. And I think like what you were saying is actually a really good question, either to ask your interviewers or, you know, screeners when you're interviewing for a company, is like, what can I not challenge at this company? And of course people will be like, oh, you could challenge anything. It's like, no, actually you can't. You know, there are some things that you're like, you know, turns out, you know, you are never, you know, where you're never going to get to work from home the way you know, we told you would. Or you know, unlimited vacation means, you know, 5 days a year. There are things that just kind of will pop out of that. And I think that's definitely a good question. If you can get unvarnished true answers out of
right, or just do your own, if you will, like, you know, as there's always the backdoor reference checks, like you should be doing the backdoor.
Oh yeah.
The company is like, go ask people what's it really like, read some of the books, like read between the lines, go read Working Backwards, not so much to learn, to be like, okay, like, do I like to write 6-page memos? Do I want to sit in a meeting and read for 20 minutes and then have like a some type of like symposium discussion around it? Like those things were out there. Like maybe they're good for you. Maybe they're not. Like no going in, right?
Yeah, most employers don't have a section of the business books to themselves. But if you're going to maybe Amazon or Intel or Microsoft, you know, there's some literature you can peruse. But most of us don't get to aren't headed to somewhere that has a lot of nonfiction about them.
I think this is the one way. I don't really necessarily say you should do this, but if you're in a position of like strength, like you don't need a job, but you're like probing for like a really good career move.
If you're an AWS employee today,
right? I think I think the best thing to do is when you're in the interview is to find something that you don't like about the product. So it's just something like you legitimately like question, like what it was done, and say it in very succinct terms in the interview. Say like, I was using this thing. I really thought this was hard to use. And I think it should be, I think you should do it like this. Or my idea would be like to do it like this. Okay.
especially
like,
if
and
you're
then
a product.
right? Because like what you will see, right, in a lot of cases, especially with the founder, the actual founder, right? You'll see one of two behaviors. They will either immediately start attacking you a little bit subtly, being like, well, what have you done? They'll kind of go back to like something about you. Be like, I don't think you've really worked in this industry or done this before or whatever, right? They'll start to like kind of make it about you. And that sort of, because that gives you like a real insight into like what is. Or they will be like, I haven't thought about that. Tell me more. Or they'll be like, you know what? We did think about this. We did this and we did this and this. And this is how we got to here. What do you think? Right. And it's like, just in that interaction, you probably have worked there for an entire year. You know what I mean? Like you could like, it can take a year to like cycle through that entire workflow. And you can walk out of the interview, like knowing right away, like, was that interaction like were you happy with it? And you don't have to work there for a whole year to do that. So that would be but again, like it can go extremely negative. So when you open this door, be like, this interview could end in the next 10 minutes. Am I okay with that?
That's a good tactic. And yeah, also I'm going to think about this idea of employee mode a lot because I've been trying to figure out what to do with that whole founder mode thing. Cause that's definitely an idea out there. I came across I figured out a new way to filter like a lot of tech commentary. Like I came across some commentary on it in Twitter, and like all the people commenting had that little blue verification thing, and all of their comments were stupid. And so like it made me realize, and like it's just like that was no good.
But I think to this point though, like on this Amazon thing, I just happened to catch this article, and I think it's like a really good example of like, so JP Morgan, obviously one of the world's largest banks. It seems like a bank you would think to yourself is like pretty kind of like set in its ways, right? But like there's been this whole talk about like junior bankers working too much. And I saw this quote here from Jamie Dimon, I guess the CEO of the bank. And he said this, he said, quote, a lot of investment bankers, they've been traveling all week. They come back and they give you 4 assignments and you've got work all weekend, Dimon said. It's just not right. And I thought that was really interesting because it kind of demonstrates Jamie Dimon, like he is very abstracted from this. But like he knows what's going on, right? You could tell he's been an investment banker and it's like, yeah, the investment bankers just come back and they're just like, they just tell the junior bankers like work all weekend, get this done. Whether or not they really need it done that weekend probably is irrelevant. It's just like, get it done. And like, and it just kind of shows it's an interesting thing about like the day two kind of thing about Amazon. It's like, how much as a culture are you constantly like learning, right? Are you constantly challenging your assumptions? And like when you see Jamie Dimon, I don't know, maybe someone will work there and tell me it's all wrong. But the fact that he was at least questioning it and saying it out loud and putting it in a press statement, like it gives you like an idea that like, okay, well, at least he's thinking about it, right? Whereas, in this one case, in the case of Amazon, it's just like, this is the way it's going to be. And it's like, oh, it's kind of interesting, right? It's like one culture is demonstrating a very rigidness and another culture has been around for a lot longer and is at least, showing some signs of openness, which I think is like, oh, that's kind of not what I would have expected.
I mean, I think it's probably adapting to the reality that people have options, and the kids these days are not going to put up with the same amount of crap.
Yeah.
Amazon. One more thing though, but inside the Amazon thing was another like different but relevant kind of thing that I thought was interesting too, because they also in that same memo said they like, hey, we think we have too much middle management. It's slowing down decision making. We're going to essentially like we want the org to be flattened. And I was like, okay, well that's interesting. It's like okay, and in the statement, Jassy actually writes about pre-meetings for decision makers. And I was like, okay, That's interesting. He's aware of that problem, right? He's thinking about it. The solution now is they're going to try is to have less management. Maybe that will work. Maybe it won't. But I'm like to me, like I'm very interested in that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, like how can we be better? What's the right management ratio? What if you have less middle management? Like, what do you lose, right? Like maybe that's bad for your careers and stuff like that. So you like, there's an area where like Amazon seems pretty open. Like, hey, flattening the organization seems like it's people are okay with that. Like the idea that you have to work in the office, that's sort of like written in granite. So it's like it's real interesting to like what can be probed and what can't. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing I took away from all of this stuff.
So I'm thinking one of the first sort of principles of employee mode is I don't know how to put it, but is like daily bullshit reduction. Like essentially like how do I not get involved in a meeting for a meeting for a meeting, right? Like it's not so much that you're interested in productivity, which would be how can I get the maximum outcome with the minimum effort, right? Otherwise known as profit, right? Like buy low, sell high. But it's more just like this is a waste of my time, right? Like I'm nothing is happening here. It's boring. It's tedious. And I think from a managerial standpoint, and you see this in other kind of tech companies, like the amount of bullshit that you can tolerate is kind of equal to the amount of cash that you generate and the value of your company, right? Like the higher the bullshit and the higher the valuation and everything, like the more bullshit you're willing to put up with, just because things seem fine. Whereas like from an employee standpoint, you're probably like, oh, I got to go to this meeting, right? Or like in the case of investment bankers, as you were alluding to, Brandon, like I was reading that and I was thinking like, I don't even know what you would do in 80 hours of work or 100 hours of work a week. Like there's like you would just be making shit up, right? Like or you would have
fried all the time that
right. And there's not even that, but like it makes me remember back to when I was doing M&A for a couple of years, and we would just do a bunch of bullshit. Like, and it was mostly like from an engineering perspective, it was mostly driven by that engineering problem you have. And by engineering, I mean programming, where the person asking for the software doesn't really know what they want. And so they don't really give you very good requirements. We would call this a rock fetching exercise. And so basically, you just like do some work and then they look at it and they're like, no, how about that? And you can tell that you get caught in this trap because you find yourself like 5 revs into it, remaking the slides that you had 2 revs into it, right? And you're kind of like, you're just bouncing through there. You're basically just like using people as a whiteboard for like the work you're doing.
Well, and so those 80-hour-a-week investment bankers, they're whiteboards. They're there for somebody up the food chain to bring me a rock.
Right. And so that's and I think from an employee mode perspective, you want to minimize you want to minimize your involvement in that, whether or not it's going on in the company. That's the managers or even the founder to mode person to worry about. But in employee mode, you're just like, I don't want to get involved in that. So there's but then you got to be careful that you don't slide too far into don't get involved, where it's just like, always, I think I've made this reference before, but what's the name of the movie? In the French Dispatch, there's the one writer who's just always hanging out in the hallway and doesn't actually ever do anything. Right. And so you don't want to be that guy. But you do want to you start to think in employee mode, like this feels like if I talk, I'm going to have to get involved. And so you start to learn how to not talk and
turn the camera off, mute yourself, just
and the positive version of this, right? To be kind of because I think the whole founder mode thing is just growth at any cost, right? And always focus on growth, right? Whatever, that's fine. That's a thing, I guess. But the positive version of the employee mode is you're not looking to avoid doing any work. You're just looking to spend your time efficiently, and
quality
not
work.
get caught up
Yeah.
in this. You want to work on smarter things, not dumber things.
But I always think the
There you
first rule, I mean, to me, I sort of kind of came up with this like de facto list in my mind, but it's like the first rule of employment is like, one, am I working for the next Steve Jobs? 99.9% of the time, you're not working for the next Steve Jobs, but that person may have been told or may think they are the next Steve Jobs. So like first you have to like adjust for that. Two,
Check the
make
wardrobe.
make the list of the things you cannot touch, right? This is what we kind of back to Amazon. Like, what are the core things about this company that literally cannot be challenged? Do you believe in those core things? And or are you okay with them? Right? Like, maybe you don't have to like buy off on everything, but you're like, I see where they're coming from. Let's give this a shot versus like, I absolutely hate this. So for example, like I really believe in remote work. The company has zero policy for remote work. Well, then, you know, right away, you're the problem. You need to get out of there. But if you're like, okay,
Right.
3 days a week is not bad. I see some potential in this idea. Not bad. And then the next thing I think is just coming down to, it's like, okay, are you willing to essentially train this executive on probably the thing that you do? Right. And because that's the thing that's going to be hard is like, okay, they're going to want to like reinvent everything. Right. That's how usually what it is. And so this is kind of back to the Steve Jobs thing. It's like, if you're with the next Steve Jobs, shut up, do what they say, keep your head down, make life-changing generation wealth. If you're not, right, you're like, okay, now this person's going to want to rethink everything. They're going to want to rethink the accounting, the recruiting, the sales strategy. And it's like, okay, can I show them the knowledge I have about this specific function? And will they actually, if you will, want to hear it? And can I help, if you will, give them information so that they can ultimately realize their dream of being the founder, right? Like, is that ultimately going to work? And if you don't feel like, they don't want to hear my ideas, they don't respect me, they just sort of want to talk down to me, they think they have it all figured out, it's like, oh, it's probably not going to go that well. But if they're kind of open to it, they're like, yeah, I've never done finance, I've never done product management, I've never done sales, I have some ideas about it, but I also want to understand what your perspective is so that we can figure out how to do it at this company, probably in a better situation, right? And things like that. So those are kind of like, I don't know, sort of like my mental checklist as I kind of go down. And then the final thing is just sort of like, can the founder, if you will, fundamentally understand the disconnect between like you own, I guess we'll bring it back to where we started today, Cube Cost. It's like, I'm sure the Cube Cost founders made a lot of money, right? And, that's maybe life-changing generational wealth for them. I don't know the whole situation, but they probably did pretty well, right? But can that founder also then understand it's like, hey, that's only 2 or 3 of us here. The rest of us here are probably working for like a little bit, like a big bonus, plus maybe like a good job at a big company. Like, can they kind of, if you will, keep that in their minds as they're asking people to do things? Because the fundamental risk and reward is so different that, I think if they always are thinking like everyone needs to think like me, going to be a difficult place to work. So I don't know, some thoughts on employee mode, if you will.
Yeah, that's good. And also just as a reminder, if you're interested in employee mode stuff, I've got a wonderful video series on O'Reilly called How to Survive and Thrive in a Big Company, which we profiled here on the show. And get this, they say you can't make money off of publishing, but I've been getting some money each month. I'm not the amount of money I can confirm is small, but it's not zero.
It's not
a little shocking.
Retired to your desert island.
I saw these deposits in my bank account, and I'm like, what is this O'Reilly thing? Why are they sending me money? And then I remembered I made these videos, and so that's
you're like,
exciting.
oh, I did some work.
Yeah. Well, speaking of doing some work, do we have any bureaucracy this episode?
The only bureaucracy we have is just simply, if you'd like a sticker, send your postal address to stickers@softwaredefined.com. I'd be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world.
Oh, well, there's some conferences coming up. If you are watching the live stream of this, you could come to SRE Day London tomorrow on September 18th, or I'm sorry, September 19th or 20th. But it'll probably be in the past. There's also Cloud Foundry Day EU, and someone told me how to say Karlsruhe, but I don't have that in front of me. So as Brandon knows, if it's not in front of me, I don't remember it. But that's going to be on October 9th in Germany. And there's a 20% off code you can use if you want to go to Cloud Foundry Day in Germany there. There's also VMware Explore Barcelona, where I'll be. That's November 4th and 7th. And then I will also be at SRE Day Amsterdam, November 21st. And then there's DevOps Days LA coming up. I guess it's DevOps Day because it's only one day. They're clever. And that's of course at scale 22x in lovely Pasadena, California. I'll have to figure out going there somehow. It seems it's a very nice little place, and I feel like I know my way around that little part of Pasadena now. There's a Whole Foods in walking distance, so I can go restock up on cumin and chili powder, things like that. It's all delicious. Now, also, I noticed that the CFP for KubeCon EU is open, which is April of 2025 in London. I think it's the first week of April, and it closes sometime in November. So I'll have to think of some papers. I don't think I've ever succeeded in getting a talk accepted at KubeCon.
Ooh. It gets like harder and harder. Yeah.
They opened up an application development track. So we got that going on.
And they've platforms for your platform.
They've combined together a bunch of things into a platform engineering track. I don't think I could get anything into there. All of the IDP people just like rule that space now, as I've covered at newsletter.cote.io. And I'm still trying to work through how they came and swiped that from all of us old people. I think maybe we were just in manager mode and they were in founder mode. And
I don't know. I feel like you should put employee mode in the title of whatever it is you submit. I feel like that's got a good chance. It seems like that's got legs. So maybe you can find a way to sneak in that way.
Yeah.
How to manage Kubernetes in employee mode. I think it's
open source employee mode.
It's got a fighting chance. It's got a fighting chance, I think. So you can consider it.
But maybe we can arrange recording a podcast there at the very least. That would be fun. So that's conferences. If you have some conference you're interested in us talking about or mentioning, you should email us at conferences@softwaredefinedtalk.com. Is that right, Brandon?
No, that doesn't. I don't think that will work. But maybe it will. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot. I think we have the all email. But
we have a catch-all.
You could do questions at softwaredefinedtalk.com.
There you go.
You could find us in the Slack too, and just let us know. But like the people that want to, we're happy to do that. We do that all the time. If you'll promote the podcast, we'll promote your conference. It's a very I don't know. Is it an open source? A barter system. It's a very simple barter system, that we work here. So it's easy.
That's right. Well, as I like to say in my transition, speaking of bartering processes, Brandon, what do you have to recommend this episode?
Well, we didn't really talk about it much this week, but this has been the release of all the new Apple operating systems. So iOS 18 and I forget.
Did you just dive in head first?
I did. I upgraded a bunch of it. And so one thing, so that means like in a year from now, Matt will upgrade. But one of the things I just like this feature. I don't know. I'm surprised that I like it. It's iPhone mirroring. So this is the ability
to run
your iPhone. So you have to be on like an M1 Mac or higher. You have to have all the latest operating system. But it's pretty cool. Like I know what I'm about to say sounds obvious, but like it pulls up your iPhone exactly as it would look like if you was holding your hand. And you can just use all the iPhone apps just like it's there. And I don't know, I just find it convenient. Like there's just certain apps that are better on the iPhone.
Authenticator.
And that's
that is the killer feature for me.
The feature is like, when you get the save requests. So the way it works is like once you integrate it, you can also have it integrate the notifications. So like your iPhone notifications will pop up on your Mac. So to your point, where Matt was going was what I was going to suggest. Is like that way when you get the QFA like message that you have to like either enter the code or you have to like say yes.
And you can copy and paste from it.
I believe so. Like you can always cut and paste from there, and so you can just basically but it's so nice. It's right there in the desktop.
Yeah,
so just like
nice.
You can just like on mine, I just have to like press the quote unquote like yes, I didn't mean to log in, or yes, it's me. So it's like so it's just sitting here right here. So I think it is a perfect solution for that. And then it's just like I don't know. It's like a lot of the videos like Instagram, I don't know, everything else. Like they also just kind of run better in the iPhone. So like even when I could use the website, the iPhone interface sometimes feels a little bit more convenient. So anyway, I don't know, it feels like one of these features that maybe they just like got it for free. They're like, well, we built a simulator. Why don't we just show the people's phones? Like, doesn't seem like something like in like an active brainstorm, you'd be like, we really need this. But once you have it, it's pretty convenient. So
it is a weird feature.
Yeah. If you're willing to upgrade all your Macs to all the latest stuff, if you're willing to jump in, give it a shot. It's a fun little app. Check it out.
How about yourself, Matt, while you're waiting for all your Macs and your family's maxed to upgrade to this new version, what are you going to be doing? What's your recommendation?
Well, I'm going to wait for that 0.1 release, get all the bugs out before I dive in. But my pick this week is really just some kudos to some things that I enjoyed in the last week. I ran the Sydney Marathon, very well organized. Just my feedback was great event. I took a ride on the Sydney Metro. It just opened. They already had a rail lines, but this is a new underground subway that's fully automated, and it just worked. And like, it's fast and nice. And then I voted in the local council elections, or kind of like county elections, and like super smooth, easy process. So my shout out is just like things that work the way they should.
There you go.
I mean, just zero complaints about any of those things.
Yeah. That's one of the best things about the Netherlands is it's just full of things that work the way they should. It's all very well thought out. Well, local elections, a Matt Ray favorite. That's
Well, I mean, I just like walked up and I'm like, here's my ID. Or I actually didn't have to show ID, but here's who I am. To cross my name off. Have you voted yet? Nope. Okay, go sign. I was took less than a minute.
Oh,
the whole process. It was amazing.
That does sound nice. Well, my recommendation,
and then when they were done, each polling station had statistics about how all the voting went down at each precinct. So like you could see like, oh, people in this neighborhood voted this way, people in that neighborhood voted that way. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is
really
fun.
Transparent. Yeah,
well functioning. Well, my I've got two recommendations. One is I'm not going to be able to put it into effect at this hotel that I'm at because I'm at a Moxie, and as I think we've covered before, the Moxies are the Motel 8 of the Marriott chain, which means they don't actually have coffee machines. They've got here because we're in London. I think we've got what they would call a kettle, and they might have powdered coffee and tea. I mean, I know they have tea. I don't know about powdered coffee. However, when you're not inside, I was in another couple of hotels over the past month. And what I recommend, it's a 2-phase thing. A lot of hotels, they use K-cups, not K-cups. They use those little tiny Nespresso. Yeah. And so even if you don't use all the Nespresso, of course, immediately, this has got 3 tips for you. Immediately when you go in there, figure out which Nespressos are the decaf and put them somewhere else, because you don't want to accidentally get a decaf one, and sometimes it's very difficult to tell. Yeah, and then if you don't use all of them, you should keep the ones you don't use and put it in your bag, so that when you are at a hotel and you really don't want to leave your room and you want like a 3rd cup of coffee, you have them in your bag to use. And indeed, you might just sort of maybe sometimes buy some. And so you travel around with like 5 or 8 of them. So you're prepared for that 3rd cup of coffee that you want to have in your room. And sometimes they have those weird ones that are a little bigger, that kind of are like a K-cup size. Just take those too. And so that you're always packing some coffee, get your coffee kit. Now, the other thing I wanted to recommend, I did an interview with the general manager of the Tanzu business unit. I don't know, my boss's boss, something or another. I've talked with her many times before, Purnima, and we talked a little bit about Tanzu stuff, but we mostly talked about like her career over the past over 20 years or so, and she's basically had worked kind of in the same stuff that all 3 of us have done. I think she worked kind of the same time at BMC that we did, and she even worked at LoudCloud. And I asked her. We didn't record this part, but I asked her if stuff in that Hard Thing About Hard Things book was true, and she was like, most of it. So that's good to know. And then she worked at several other places in systems management, so it's fun to kind of walk down the kind of pre-cloud era of managed service providers, and then getting into like IT service management and ITEL, and then public cloud, and then kind of thinking about DevOps and platform engineering, just all that kind of stuff over the past couple decades. So you should go listen to that. It's a podcast. So if you like listening to this, you may like that because it's topical and in the same medium. But if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/485, softwaredefined.com/485, you can find a link to that, all the other things that we mentioned and recommended, including a link to Matt Ray's local council elections, which I went and visited. It was a handsome looking page. It was very efficient. Looks like it told you the information that you needed to know. You should go check that out. And conferences we mentioned, news we covered, all sorts of stuff we didn't cover that you can spend your time delightfully reading through when you're contemplating powdered coffee from a kettle. With that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, well done as always. Cote, a question for you. I think we should give a shout out to who is your mobile phone service provider? It looks like they came through. Is it,
I believe I'm using Vodafone here.
All right, so we should say Vodafone came through. They, I don't know.
I can't really tell.
Vodafone came through. Cote successfully tethered the entire podcast with video that all seemed to work. So I don't know. I think we should give. You okay, Cote? Now I'm worried. Now you're falling down.
I dropped my glasses and I can't find them.
Huh. Well, it worked great up until this point where Cote was lost his glasses. So
I think they're down there somewhere. Yeah.
All right. Well, a quick fun post-show question. I thought I'd ask both of you because you're expats, and and maybe learning new languages is important, maybe not. But my question is this: I've been trying to learn Spanish, and I ended up having this conversation with my son. I did a little bit of research. What language is the easiest to learn from a native English speaker? So each language, right? And then while you think about it, I'll just say my son who has been learning Spanish and is a very good speaker through school. I was complaining to him. I was like, I don't know, Spanish is like everything's reversed. Like the adjective is after the noun, and I'm always like making that mistake. Yeah. I'm always trying to Americanize in it, and so that got me thinking like, I wonder is there like an easier language, a language that's sort of like that would even be easier for me to learn? And so that's what got me down the rabbit hole of like, what is the next adjacent language? I don't know, Matt. And for the purposes of this, we're going to assume Australia speaks English, and even though we speak a different version of English, we're going to keep it. That's not the next obvious one. So, Matt, what would you like to guess?
Well, my guess would be, once you have one Romance language, going to the next hop over is pretty straightforward. Because I can hear Italian and some Portuguese, and for my Spanish, I get the gist of it, but. Mm-hmm. Spanish wasn't my first language. I don't know. I mean, Spanish wasn't my second second language. So I'm still gonna say it's probably like a Romance language that hasn't evolved too much. It has fairly standard rules.
Okay, and
that's my guess. Yeah.
Okay, which one? You gotta give us a language. Pick one.
Italian.
All right. And Cote, what would
Italian?
you?
Well, you ruined my joke. It was going to be that Matt Ray's demonstrated Australian is the easiest language to learn, but that's fine. It should be Dutch because English and the English is like a Saxon language, which Dutch and German are, and then German is like, I don't actually know German that well, but it seems like they got it a little too complicated with the language.
Yeah.
Whereas like Dutch is very simple and stripped down from a perspective. And there's like so many words that are like very, very similar, like house and, things like that.
Or card mates for father. They're pronounced the same, but spelled differently. Or
right. But I think the problem there is that pretty much everyone who speaks Dutch speaks English, so it's like hard to have to learn it. Anyways, and also a very small population. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm obviously incredibly biased being from Texas, but I feel like Spanish probably is a pretty good language because the main thing you have going for it is there's a shit ton of people who speak it.
Yeah,
right? Like it's
well, I would have Italian because I assumed it would be like closer to the root of
Yeah,
Romance
and
languages
and
and
so
simpler.
Mhm.
so I feel like you're all like nowadays you're going to hear a lot of English, right? And I
Mhm.
think you're probably going to hear a fair amount of Spanish, right? Like it's just going to come up. It's like it's part of American culture and it's its own culture in the various countries that it's spoken. So like it seems like that would be something you would be exposed to. But I'm also very cautious because obviously I'm very biased about like having been around it all my life.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, here you guys both good answers here. So here's the official answer. The official answer: the easiest English adult language to learn coming from a native English speaker is indeed Dutch. So that surprised me. And so I guess
Get
if
to
you
it,
want to know
Cote.
the quick history here is probably as maybe everyone knows, but it's sort of like Dutch and English are both Germanic languages, right? So they
Mhm.
don't technically come from the Romance family. And so I guess the history is that like all of this sort of derived from German or Germanic languages. And I guess what happened was I guess the Dutch broke off, and then if you will, German, if you will, got like more German kind of went its own way, which sort of is kind of funny because it is sort of like stylistic. And it's like, yeah, German, if you will, got more complicated, at least as compared to an English speaker, whereas Dutch is sort of kept like, if you will, the familiarity of English, right? The kind of the structure of English, which I thought which was fun, which was interesting. And then of course, Cote, I felt bad for you because this seems like when they give you a hard time, when you go through customs and when you go home to through Chapel there at the airport, they're always like, "What? You haven't learned Dutch yet?" Well, it turns out Dutch is the easiest language for you to learn. So I don't now. Now you need to be like, "Well, my
Good to
native
know.
language." You should be like, "My native language is like Spanish or something along those lines." And then
Yeah,
a quick thing
yeah.
because Matt mentioned Romance languages. So although not technically a Romance language, English has heavily influenced by Romance languages, specifically French. And the quick history there is
Mhm.
that I guess like when France, if you will, overtook like was ruling England, the if you will, the nobles, the English nobles or aristocracy learned French, right, and spoke French, and so therefore a lot of the vocabulary of English comes from French and has a lot of like, if you will, Romance languages. Influence. So there you go. There, languages with Brandon. Now you know. So I don't know, but now none of this made it my thing any easier. It's like, well, I guess Spanish, which I'm trying to learn, it's like, well, that's actually a pretty easy language for American or English speaker to learn. So I was hoping to be like, well, this is like really, really hard, but it's not. But if you want to know really hard languages, it's like Arabic, Mandarin, all of those are like very, very hard. Takes you many, many years as an English speaker to master those. So start now if you're trying to get your Mandarin going.
Well,
All right.
bueno.
Well, with that, I don't know. I don't know, Cote. Can you say goodbye in Dutch? Maybe that was how we should end this. So do you know?
Well, I
Dutch?
feel like we have a certain intimacy and friendliness with our the friendly one, which is and they always say it, not always, but it's frequently said in almost a comical tone where they say "Dewey."
Right. Well, on that note, we will. Well, on that note, we'll be back streaming probably this time around next week, and look forward to other arbitrary facts we come up with to talk in the after show. Until then, take care.
Bye.